Is it not working?
We are live. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, Pitt fans. Welcome to our brand new dedicated Pitt Panthers channel on the PG Sports YouTube network. I'm Stephen Thompson. That's Abby Schnable. We cover Pitt athletics for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and we are delighted to have you with us tonight for the launch of this new channel. It's part of our expanding coverage. We want you to stay tuned to this channel year-round for updates on Panthers football, basketball, volleyball, and really anything else that's relevant in the world of Pitt athletics. You know, Abby has been in and around our Pitt coverage for a few years now. I'm entering my second year covering Pitt for the Post-Gazette. Been covering a bunch of different things in and around Pitt athletics for about 7 years now. So we're really excited to get this launched, and we hope that you all will stay tuned with us throughout football season, throughout basketball season, the winter, and obviously Abby is going to have her outstanding volleyball coverage that she's going to keep you guys updated with as well. So please like this video, subscribe to the channel, use the chat function. We'll be keeping up with you guys, taking your questions, taking your comments, putting them out for everyone to see and talking with you about Pitt football for the rest of the evening. Abby, I'm really excited. I think we're both in football mode. We've been through the grind of training camp, and now that we're kind of at the end of things, why don't you give us maybe one big takeaway that you had after, I guess we were at 19 practices of training camp, and we're getting into game week next week.
Yeah, it was, first of all, this was my first training camp. I think I jumped in and helped Chris and Steven maybe once or twice last year, but this was the first time I was there for the whole thing. So it was really cool to experience that and really learn the team and see the progression. I got to say, I said this to Steven before we got on air. This was one of my takeaways after media day, and it's continued to be one of my takeaways. And that's got to look at the tight end room over there. I mean, you've got Jake Overman, Malachi Thomas, and Justin Holmes. And what I love about this tight end room and what has showed up day after day is that they have depth, and depth in the fact that all three of those guys could start next week. I won't say tomorrow, next week. And that's just really interesting because they all add a little bit something different. Jake Overman's pretty well-rounded. Malachi Thomas has a lot of athleticism. Justin Holmes is known for his blocking and his miswritten height on various things. We've talked a lot about that. He's a very tall guy, but his initial roster, or the initial height was listed wrong.
Yeah, Marshall seemed to think that he was about 3 inches shorter than he actually is. So,
yeah,
Marshall and EA Sports actually in the college football video game, they had to update that. I think this summer. So.
Yeah, but so I was really impressed. When you lose a guy like Gavin Bartholomew in that room, there's a little bit of a shift. I mean, he's been such a heavy presence on this team, and it was kind of like, what are you going to do without him? And I feel like these three guys have really stepped up. Coach Bernowski has really had nothing but great things to say. And it's going to be a different look. I don't know if you're just going to have one guy really taking the majority of the snaps. I think it's going to be a lot of different things. Steven, what was your biggest takeaway from camp?
Yeah, I mean, real quickly, I'll touch on the tight ends as well for a second. I think you're exactly right about the diversity of skills that you have in that tight end room. Coming from, the past 3 seasons, it's been the Gavin Bartholomew show. It's been one guy who's taken the lion's share of those snaps. Now you've got a bunch of different guys who do a bunch of different things well. I think, Jake Overman is probably the starter or, the top end guy in that depth chart that we're going to see on Monday. But there are going to be a lot of guys who play a lot. And, we've even heard a little bit about Max Hunt as well, the true freshman that they brought in. I think a really nice pass catcher. And so he's a guy that you could look at for some playing time as well. To me, I think the thing that stands out the most, you look up and down the roster, but then you walk out to practice and you watch these guys moving around in their pads. And I really am optimistic about this defensive line. I think you're going to see something much closer to a vintage Pat Narduzzi defensive line this season for the Pitt Panthers. Between guys like Jimmy Scott, Francis Brew, Nick James, Sean Fitzsimmons, who are coming back, I think you've also got some really intriguing transfer additions. I think the defensive end spot is a little bit banged up. We'll talk about that in a minute. But Blaine Spires is really interesting. Jaden Moore, we've heard a lot about. And I really like Joey Zielinski. I think he's one guy who we could see as maybe a breakout candidate this season coming over from Eastern Michigan via the transfer portal. At the beginning of camp, I thought this defensive line is supposed to be kind of an aid to the outstanding linebackers that Pitt has, between Kyle Lewis and Rasheem Biles and Braylan Lovelace. But I'm starting to think more and more, and the more I was out there at practice, I was thinking, no, this is a really good unit all on its own. I think the defensive tackles are not just deep, but they have a lot of really top end talent. Some guys that can maybe play in the NFL someday. And then again, I like the defensive end spot as well. I think they're super deep, led by Jimmy Scott, who had a breakout year last year, and I think is in line for an even better year this year. Abby, I mentioned. Go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to say that, yeah, the defensive line, I mean, coming from not having covered the team and being on the peripheral last year and the year prior, I knew that like the defense was good. Like I couldn't go scroll through Twitter on a game day without getting a Sharks notification. But then it was like, it's not just the Sharks. And I think that's what's really cool about how they reloaded, especially at defensive end, is all three of those transfers. Like that's been one of the most fun battles to watch, is just because there is that open defensive end spot that's very intriguing, because you have three guys in Blaine Spires, Jaden Moore, and Joey Zielinski who have all been talked about. And then with the D tackles, you've got four guys that are very solid. I know only Sean Fitzsimmons and Nick James will likely, they'll all play, but they'll be the starters probably. It's just a strong room to really have to, like you said, to kind of back up in a way the linebackers.
Yeah, exactly. And, speaking of those linebackers, some bad news coming out this week when we talked to Pat Narduzzi, injuries to backups Jeremiah Marcelin and Jaden Bonsu, a couple of reserves, but they are season-ending injuries, and they were two parts of what we thought was a really, really deep linebacker room, which I still think it's a deep room, but these are two really important guys to be missing. Abby, in your mind, how big are these losses, and is Pitt going to be able to survive these throughout the season? Not just kind of thinking about, are they going to get by Duquesne in Central Michigan, but are they going to be able to, sustain some of their production from the linebacker spot without Marcelin and Bonsu in there?
Yeah, I think I don't think it's a huge hit, like a season derailing hit. I mean, I think Jeremiah Marcelin was really high on the coach's radar at the end of the spring. I mean, they were talking about him and Braylan Lovelace really fighting for that Mike spot. And so I was really excited to see Jeremiah Marcelin really be that number 4 linebacker who's able to go in and give those guys a break. But is it a big deal, really? I mean, let's be real. Rasheem Biles, Braylan Lovelace, and Kyle Lewis were going to take a majority of the snaps anyway. I think Steven has numbers on this to back that up, but it's just when you have a linebacker room or just a solid lineup like that with those three, you don't really have to shuffle that much except for when they need a break. And I like the guys that they have behind that were behind Bonsu and Marcelin too.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And I can give you some of those numbers that I had pulled up earlier this week. Kyle Lewis played 84% of available snaps last year. Brandon George played 72%. You have Rasheem Biles played 54%. That's with him missing one game. Missed the Cal game due to an injury. Braylan Lovelace played 45%, and Key Thompson played 25%. So really they went 5 deep. And if you look at Pitt's linebacker room right now, I think they're about 4 guys deep, between those top 3 guys that you mentioned, and then Cameron Lindsay and, Nick Lappy. They talk about him a lot. He's played some football for them before, played special teams. I don't necessarily look at him as, kind of plug and play backup equal or kind of on par in the same way that Jeremiah Marcelin might have been. So it's a little tricky here in that I think an injury to obviously Rasheem Biles or Kyle Lewis, who are the 2 best players in that group, that would be pretty devastating. An injury to Braylan Lovelace, I think, would be even more devastating just because you don't necessarily have the depth of experience at middle linebacker that you do on the outside. Like I think Cam Lindsay could fill in really well at either of those outside linebacker spots. I'm not as sure that he or Nick Lappy could be a similar level of player on the inside. But at the end of the day, if you lose a Rasheem Biles, if you lose a Kyle Lewis to injury, you're you're kind of in a tough spot anyway, regardless of who your backup is. So injuries there would be bad no matter what. That situation doesn't really change given that Marcelin and Bonsu are not there anymore. So don't want to diminish what those losses were, but the reality is that Pitt doesn't rotate a ton at linebacker anyway, or at least they didn't last year, which with what I would argue was a thinner room when everyone is at. So I'm not freaking out about these losses either. I think it's something that Pitt can survive, but obviously if you have an injury to one of your All-American candidates, I would say Rasheem Biles or Kyle Lewis, then you're definitely in a tough spot.
Yeah, and going into training camp, this was one of those position groups that were really solid. We kind of knew before we even saw them who was gonna be the starters on that group, but there were a couple of position battles we were following pretty closely, and we won't know all of the answers until we get that depth chart on Monday. But arguably the most intriguing one to me, especially after last year's 0-6 and because of this group, I was very intrigued by the offensive line this year, specifically at that left tackle spot, because that was arguably the bigger battle. But when you have three guys returning like Ryan Baer, Lyndon Cooper, and BJ Williams, yeah, you have to plug in new people there. And they brought in three really big transfers that have been battling all season and not season, all training camp. And it's interesting. Steven, what were your takeaways from that battle?
Yeah, well, it seems pretty cut and dry, I think, at this point that Jeff Percy is going to be your starting left tackle, which, I think Pitt fans should be really excited. Who's actually played a lot of high-level football at Michigan before. He's bounced around positions a little bit, but that's a guy with bona fide Power 5 experience that I think you can really count on. And then behind him, I think you can also feel really good about Kendall Stanley, who was an all-conference player at Charlotte last year and is still relatively young. I think he's only a redshirt sophomore, I want to say. But either way, he has multiple years of eligibility left. So he is both a starting quality player now, but also someone that I think Pitt can think about moving forward as someone who can play football for them after Percy, who is a 6th year or I believe a graduate student, moves on to either the NFL or whatever's next for him. And then, Keith Gueva has been kind of the more quiet addition just because we haven't really had to talk about him as much, mostly because he's just kind of a plug-and-play guy at that left guard spot. So seems like Cueva, who also might serve as a little bit of a backup center, maybe a third string center, but he's one of their options as far as snapping the ball goes. I think all of those guys were arguably the biggest additions of the offseason for Pitt. Actually, I don't even think that's arguable. I think the way that the offensive line shook out last year, the number of injuries that they had, not getting starter quality guys and not building the depth would have been disastrous this offseason for this team. The left tackle, figuring out the offensive line, I think they still have had some shuffling to do. Maybe in the third week of training camp, kind of towards the end there, it seems like they have a lot of that figured out now, and you've got a pretty cohesive starting lineup as you head into game week. Some more of the interesting position battles were kind of on the opposite side of the offensive line, in my mind, kind of directly across from them. And that's at the defensive end position, like we talked about. I think this position's been a little banged up throughout camp. You're starting to hear a little bit more about guys like a Zach Carruthers, guys like a Joey Zielinski, who maybe we didn't hear as much about at the start of camp. If there were guys on the defensive line who were out for the season, Pat Narduzzi would have told us. But I do think that there are some kind of bumps and bruises from training camp that they are dealing with right now. At the same time, I still think that given the runway that Pitt has into some of their more difficult games of the year, you should still feel very confident about this defensive end position. This is going to be the second time I bring him up. I'm going to bring him up one more time, but I'm really excited about what Joey Zielinski can do. We've gotten to watch a little bit of team drills, a little bit of 11-on-11 stuff, and Zielinski has really popped. He's a lot more athletic than I thought he was. He's a lot quicker. He's got some speed. He's got good hands. So I'm really excited about him. And like I said earlier, Jimmy Scott is a guy that I'm really looking for. I think in my mind should have been he had a chance to be a double-digit sack guy last year. He left a lot of missed sacks on the table, and he can do that again this year. He only finished with 6 last year, but there were easily 4 or 5 plays where he had a quarterback wrapped up in the backfield and just wasn't able to bring him down. So Jimmy Scott is one of those guys that I'm looking forward to level up a little bit and lead this defensive end group to where like I said at the top of the show, where they're going to be, which I think is a very vintage Pat Narduzzi defense where you're leading the country or among the leaders in the country in sacks and tackles for loss.
What I really enjoyed about kind of the way that the coaches and the players were talking about how this position battle unfolded is, and we still don't know. Like I think there are 3 options, maybe 4 if you want to go down to Zach Crothers too, that could be in that starting spot opposite of Jimmy Scott. But I liked how I thought it was interesting how at the beginning of the season, it was all about Jaden Moore. Beginning of camp. Sorry, I keep saying that. Beginning of camp, it was all about Jaden Moore, and then it kind of transitioned a little bit into more about Spires. And now we're talking about Joey Zielinski a lot, it's interesting. I'm sure all the fans out there have their predictions. But speaking of predictions, Steven, let's go down the line. We've got a couple. I want to start with breakout stars. Who is your number 1 breakout star for this season?
Yeah, if you follow me on Twitter, you have a pretty good idea of who this guy is. For me, it is Qatar's Blue Hicks. He is a transfer from Louisville at wide receiver. A little bit of a shorter guy at 5'10", but has some weight on him at 175. I think he's my pick right now to be the team's second leading receiver behind Kenny Johnson. And I think that for a couple of reasons. First, he is explosive. He's got great speed. He is really able to break long runs from short passes. And I think that's going to be huge for Pitt offense, that struggled to create big plays at time and needed to kind of find some different ways to create explosive plays besides just throwing deep down the field. How about you? Who do you think is a breakout candidate for this Pitt team this year?
Mine is Mr. Francis Brew. I mean, I think the buzz around him is already pretty high. He was on the Athletics College Football Freaks list. That guy is an absolute unit. Like I don't think I've ever seen him in person. So when we had him at availability last week or whenever it was, I was like, oh my God, he is a big guy, but in a very fit way. I mean, look, last year his PFF score was 75.0, which was the highest for freshman defensive tackles. Yeah, he's still got returning starter Sean Fitzsimmons likely in front of him in the depth chart. But Francis is a guy that's going to go out there and be explosive and make some plays and get some guys on the ground. And I think we're just going to get to see that more and more this season, especially with, as you said, the vintage Pat Narduzzi defensive line. Brew really fits into that kind of vibe.
Absolutely. He is, I think, a bit in a Kalijah Kancey mold, a guy who is smaller, maybe a little undersized, but has some speed and has some power that will really surprise people as well. Moving on a little bit, Abby, we're going to get into a little bit of a game here. We're going to play higher or lower. I've picked out some stats, some stat predictions for some Pitt stars this year, and we're going to go back and forth, and we're going to very quickly, a little rapid fire, higher or lower on these different statistical benchmarks for Pitt players this year. And I want to start with Desmond Reid, a guy who can do it all, but I want to know what he's going to do on the ground running the football this year. Desmond Reid, Abby, is he going to have over 999.5 rushing yards this season or under? Basically, do you think he's going to rush for 1,000 yards this season? Why or why not?
I'm going with the over because last year he was pretty dang close and missed a game. And he can't really miss games this season with how the running back room looks right now. And so, I mean, he did that while banged up. He did that while missing a game. And the O-line is supposed to be better this year. Should open a few more holes for him to not get as banged up. So that's why I'm taking the over. Mine to you now is over under. Is quarterback Eli Holstein going to play in 9.5 games?
I'm taking the over on this one. I think he's going to play in 10 or more games. I believe he played in, I want to say 10 last year, but he did not finish all of those. for a lot of the same reasons that you think about Dez. I think the offensive line is going to be better. I think he's going to be a little bit smarter. He's also a little bit faster. He's slimmed down a little bit, about 5 or so pounds, so that he can be a little bit more athletic in the run game. So I think Eli is going to avoid more hits this year, and I think that's going to lead to him playing some more games for Pitt this year. And I think that's going to be ultimately and fairly obviously a very good thing for him. Sticking on the offensive side of the ball, this one's a little off the wall, so bear with me. But Pitt's leading receiver last year was Konate Mumpfield. He hauled in 813 receiving yards to lead the team. But my question to you, Abby, will Pitt's leading receiver this year, whether it's Kenny Johnson, Poppy Williams, Blue Hicks, will they go over 813 yards receiving or under?
I'm going to take the over because, look, you've got returning talent in Kenny Johnson and Poppy Williams. They should be better after another year. And also the offense as a whole should be better now that we're in year 2 of Kade Bell's system. There's been a lot more emphasis in camp about really hitting your targets. And I feel like that relationship between the quarterbacks and the wide receivers is pretty solid right now. So I feel pretty comfortable saying the over for right now. This one you will like. This is very catered to you with your defensive line love. Jimmy Scott, over or under 6.5 sacks?
Yeah, I guess I already answered this one, but I think over. So he was at 6 last year. He left 4 or 5 on the table, at least in my memory. So I think he's going over, and I think he's clearing that number pretty easily. Give me Jimmy Scott. This line probably should have been at like 9.5. I think he's going for double digits this year. Sticking on the defensive side of the ball, Abby, Kyle Lewis, he had 4 interceptions last year to lead the team. Do you think he goes over 3.5 interceptions this year or under? And is that the team lead? Is that going to be enough to lead Pitt in interceptions this year?
So I'm probably going to get some flack for this, but I'm personally taking the under.
Because I would have too. I think that's smart.
Okay. Because he's got a bigger target on his back. They're going to try and avoid getting in situations in which Kyle Lewis is the main guy defending there. And so with less opportunities to intercept the ball, that just inherently means lower, but it gives more opportunities for Rasheem Biles, Braylan Lovelace, the rest of the defense. So I'm going under.
Absolutely. And I completely agree. I think that's a smart way to go. I would take the under as well. And really quickly, Abby, and we're going to do this while we're bringing in our next guest. We're going to bring him in to answer this last one. But, our friends at FanDuel have Pitt's win total for this year at 6.5 regular season wins. That's their line. So I want to hear from you. I want to hear from me. I want to hear from our guest, which we'll introduce in a second. Over or under 6.5 wins for Pitt football this season?
I am going to take the over, but not by much. I'm going with the over because, look, they should be better than last year, just period. The majority of the positions returned a majority of the starters. There are only a few that really had battles. The offensive line should be better. The offense should run smoother. I mean, the defense is already really good. And so because of that, like at minimum, they're going to be equal to what they won last year. So I might be wrong. I've never been good at making predictions, so I could be wrong, but I'm going to go with the over.
I think I'm going to go with the over too. I think 8 should be kind of the goal for this team. I think 8 I would kind of consider a good season, and anything less than that I would be pretty disappointed by. And now let's bring on our first guest of the evening. You know him. You love him. A former Post-Gazette Pitt beat writer. Still covers football in Western Pennsylvania. You have seen him. If you follow football in this part of the country, you know this man. He has had a hand in covering high school, college, and professional football in this city. You know him. You love him. Let's bring on Christopher Carter. Chris, welcome.
What's up, everybody? How we doing?
We're doing really well. Chris, so
over
I guess
unders.
Yeah, we want your take on it. What do you think about Pitt football over under 6.5 regular season wins?
I got them over. I like this team. I think that there's a lot of positive things. The biggest thing is they need Eli Holstein to believe in what Kade Bell is building. If they're able to do that, if they're able to bring out the Eli Holstein that can hit the underneath routes that are opening up naturally, what Kade Bell's drawing up, they'll be a very dangerous offense. I think they'll win the majority of their games. They'll run up against some tough competition in the ACC. I don't have them beaten. I have their losses coming at Notre Dame, Miami, and Georgia Tech, which is crazy enough. The 3 last games of the season, kind of feeling a little bit like last year. Maybe they sprinkle in another loss earlier, but I think this team is good enough to beat the team they're supposed to beat in the non-conference, and that includes West Virginia. And I think they'll stumble somewhere else in the ACC, but I see this team being good enough to get to 8 wins this year, as you guys are saying. I think that there's talent, there's returning talent, there's building talent, and I think that's something that Pat Narduzzi does very well. He builds talent. Guys believe in his program. Pitt doesn't spend nearly as much as a lot of these other programs out here, but they're still out here swinging and competing with the best in the ACC. So I will put them at 8 wins on the year. They'll go to a decent bowl game, and then that always depends on just who they get and who rests and who doesn't rest in the bowl game.
Well, Chris, you alluded to it a little bit, but getting the Eli Holsteins who's able to operate this offense efficiently is a reason for optimism. Year 2 with Kade Bell, having the system in place, it's something that has a lot of people around Pitt really excited for the 2025 season. I just want to get your impressions of what you saw at a Kade Bell system last year, and what do you think that this scheme is capable of this year, and if it improves in the ways that it should.
Well, as a football junkie, there's a lot of things to appreciate about what Kade Bell does as far as his route concepts. He looks at teams that they play, and he creates natural just mismatch situations where his guys are running a route concept that's going to give the quarterback an ABC type of decision. Hey, if they're in this coverage, you go A. If they're in this coverage, you go B. If they're in this coverage, you go C. And so many times, Eli Holstein, I think, understood that in the clutch situations last year when the game kind of sped up and he was just like, let me just trust what I'm seeing. And I think that really worked early on. But I do think that when you look at how everything's Steelers, and I'm dealing with other stuff.
You are locked in a different mode, man.
Right. But I do think that if Eli Holstein gets that, like early on, he started to hit that. I think that as the year went on, you saw Eli Holstein try to go for the big play a lot more, and he needed to understand that the big play is sometimes the simple play right here. It's the quick pop pass that can get you 8 yards, because then that softens up the defense. If he understands that, Kade Bell's offense opens up so many opportunities, and then those deep opportunities will present themselves because it's designed to sort of pepper the defense with the passing game and catch them in just situations where speed can beat size. And they have speed with Desmond Reid. They have speed with Kenny Johnson. Blue Hicks looks really, really interesting. You got route running with Poppy Williams. This O-line holds up, and Eli Holstein trusts what Kade Bell's putting together schematically. I think Pitt's offense can be very dangerous in the ACC.
Chris, you mentioned go ahead.
No, just want to remind everyone to like and subscribe to the channel. Obviously, we appreciate you guys joining us this evening to talk some Pitt football. We got Chris Carter on, and use the chat function if you got questions for us, got questions for Chris. We're going to do a Q&A portion at the end, but we're very happy to take your questions at any time. So Abby, go ahead. It sounds like you had a question for Chris. Right there.
Yeah, Chris, you mentioned Des Reid a little bit, which I think it leads nicely into our next question and really goes with your NFL expertise over here, is what Pitt players should be on the NFL draft radars, and is Des Reid one of them?
I think Des can be one of them. He's just really up against it with his size. I mean, like, Des is what, 5'6". You're looking at a very, like, there's the NFL likes their short guys, but their short guys are like 5'9", 5'8" at the lowest. So Des is going to have to be a really dangerous playmaker in college, and he is. I think he can get there, but I think he's going to have some challenges there to overcome that size when he gets to the combine. I do think he'll get a combine invite. I think teams will look at him, but he's going to be looked at like a pure third down back type of guy, return man type of guy. But hey, I think he's got the talent to be there. I think that's certainly something to watch there. I'll be interested to see the hype that Eli Holstein can build for himself with how he plays this year, because he is on scouts' radar as far as development. He has a lot of the tools that you like, but he's got to put it together. The fall off that he had last year was kind of hurt his chances. So I'll be interested to see what he does there. As always, you got to keep an eye on those Pitt defensive backs, because Pat Narduzzi and his staff, Archie Collins, Corey said, they do such a good job developing these guys for the NFL. And there's three guys that I think that they've been building. Tamon Lynham, a redshirt senior transfer at corner, Javon McIntyre, redshirt senior safety, who's been pretty good, and Rashad Bettle, who's the redshirt senior corner. The three of those guys have been in this system for a while, and I think that they are guys who are developing. If they have good years, they'll get noticed a little bit, and they'll be put out there for NFL teams to take a look at. So if they can make some plays this year, they could be guys that get the look too. I don't think this roster has that experienced tackle that Pitt has had with Carter Warren or Matt Gonsalves, or just name a tackle that's been drafted to the NFL through Pitt in the past few years, who's been on the team, played multiple positions, and been in that. Ryan Baer might be that guy next year, but he's a redshirt junior. I expect him to come back next year, barring anything crazy. And maybe he has a great year and he says, I'm going to the NFL now. But I think that's why I look at right now, if I'm picking one position, it's probably that cornerback position. Another player, of course, you got to look at, though, is Kyle Lewis, being a redshirt junior. Maybe he wants to go out early. He's an All-American already. Maybe he says, you know what, I don't want to risk any injury. But I also wonder, in that realm, does NIL money play a factor? Does Kyle Lewis want to stick around to make NIL money with Pitt one more year, maybe up his draft stock a little bit more, and then go to the NFL? All that there. But there's good players on this team. It's just, I think that a lot of the good players are juniors this year who aren't like bona fide first round picks. So if they're not first round picks and you're a junior, usually you want to stick around until you either are a first round pick or you up your status as much as you can.
Chris, I want to follow up on Kyle a little bit really quickly if we can. I mean, he is not the biggest guy in the world. Like, he is not small either, but how do the kind of size demands change when you're going from college to the NFL? Pitt likes, that he's a little smaller and a little quicker, but our NFL team's going to like that in the same way.
Teams are going to like that because like that he can move and hit in space. That, like, he's not tiny. Like, he's 6'1". He's light. So, like, he's not a big guy, but he's also not the smallest linebacker. Like, Devin Bush, a guy that the Steelers drafted back in 2019, he wasn't even 6 foot. That's smaller. I think Kyle Lewis has the length to play in the NFL. The teams might say, hey, we might need you to bulk up a little bit for your role in our defense. But I think he kind of shows what you want to see as far as sideline to sideline, coverage help, blitz help, run defense help. He does a lot of things really well. I think he has a really good chance. I don't know if he comes out this year, because I think that he might not be a first round pick solidified, and he might say, let me stick around to see if I can get to first round pick status. But I think if he has another great year this year, maybe he does get first round pick status, and move that into next season. And then you're looking at maybe Kyle Lewis can get Pitt back to having a first rounder in the NFL draft, like Elijah Cansey and Kenny Pickett were in back-to-back years.
And really quick, Chris, before we, I guess, let you go, we've already kept you for a little longer than we said we would. But how's our guy Ben Sauls doing? We saw he had a pretty decent night last night for the Steelers. But what are you hearing about Pitt's last place kicker, going into the NFL?
4 made field goals last night at Everbank Stadium in Charlotte, North Carolina. That's the way you want to end it if you're Ben Sauls. He made a 50-yarder. I think that Ben Sauls has done what he's supposed to do in this camp. Everyone knew as soon as the Steelers picked him up as an undrafted free agent, he was not supplanting Chris Boswell. Chris Boswell is the best kicker in the NFL right now. And what's funny is Ben Sauls has the longest made field goal at Acrisure Stadium in college at 58 yards. The longest made field goal at Acrisure Stadium in the pros, Chris Boswell at 59 yards. So there's a lot of similarities there. But I do think what Ben Sauls did is he might have earned himself a paycheck. With some of these teams out here, they're going to have to get their kicker injured, or that kicker's going to miss a big kick. And teams are going to look around the NFL and they'll say, who did really well in preseason? That guy from Pitt who has who's up there with Chris Boswell and made 4 straight kicks to end the preseason. Let's take a look at that guy. So he won't make the Steelers team, but he will be a guy who's first on a lot of people's lists to find a replacement kicker. And he deserves that. He's earned that. Good on Ben Sauls. I think he's had a heck of a camp. He's a good guy. We've covered him, and he's been great to talk to all throughout Steelers camp. And he's been super appreciative of the process and appreciative of Chris Boswell too in his learning process. So Ben Sauls doing his job and will definitely have a role in the NFL at some point.
We love to hear it.
Yeah, Ben Sauls being such a staple of Pitt and seeing him stay in Pittsburgh was cool, but who knows? Who knows? Well, Chris, we just want to say thank you so much for hopping on and talking some NFL as well as some, Kade Bell's schemes. So thank you so much for hopping on our live show.
Thanks for having me, guys.
That was Chris Carter, our good friend. You guys know him and love him from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Make sure you're following all his work covering the Steelers if you're a football fan in Western Pennsylvania. He's a great guy to follow on Twitter as well. We're really excited about our next guest as well. We really appreciate him taking the time. I'll introduce him. He is a national college football writer for CBS. He's based out of Texas, knows a lot of Big 12, but has had a hand in some SEC and some Big 10 coverage. We really appreciate him coming on to talk about Pitt and the ACC. Please welcome CBS Sports' Shehan Jeyarajah. I hope I did not butcher that. I apologize.
You got it perfectly right. Well done.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, Shehan. I'm really curious, as a national writer, what are you doing kind of week 0 and week 1? Are you going to be in any stadiums? Are you going to have Command Central at home? What are you getting up to?
I mean, the funny thing about being a national writer is that, you can't put too much into one game, right? So, I will be at Baylor versus Auburn next Friday because it's a driving distance game for me. But, so much of the rest of the year, I'm, pulling up 6 games at a time on my computer screen, trying to keep track of as much as possible. So I try to get out to maybe 4 games a year on Saturdays. And I love, frankly, Thursday and Friday games that are local for me because I maybe get a chance to go to some of them. But right now, especially tomorrow, I'm just going to enjoy the moment.
I'm curious, what ACC game do you have circled for that first week?
Ooh, I mean, I'm really interested. You obviously have to look at the Clemson game and that one really jumps off the page with their game against LSU, similar with the Miami game as well. Those are huge, big time national matchups. I'm also fascinated to see Georgia Tech open up. They open against Colorado. That's, I think, an under the radar game that's going to say a lot about both those teams. And Georgia Tech is getting some dark horse playoff love right now and ACC title buzz. And I don't know that I'm all the way there on Georgia Tech as being that level of team, but this is the kind of game where obviously a lot of people will be watching. You're playing against an opponent who I think should be overmatched if Georgia Tech's as good as we think they can be. So I think that this is a big prove-it opportunity for them. And kind of on the other side of things, obviously you mentioned my Big 12 background, TCU, North Carolina, I think it's kind of the opposite of that. I think that for TCU, that's a big opportunity for them to come out and really stuff UNC in a locker if they're as good as we think that they have the chance to be.
Well, I can tell you that the playoff love for Georgia Tech, it originates from my apartment, I'm pretty sure. I'm really buying that.
Listen, I've been on Haynes King since he was at Longview High School out here in Texas, but it's a lot to ask to take Georgia Tech to the playoff.
It is. But, I'm sure you'll be locked in on Pitt Duquesne week 1 as well. So we do, want to get your thoughts on the
crosstown rivals, all that, of course.
Absolutely. It's a grudge match. But, Pitt picked to finish 9th in the ACC this year. It's well documented. Started 7-0, finished 0-6. I guess what's your read on Pitt is where they got picked in that ACC precinct poll. Do you think that's accurate or fair for what you've seen out of them or what you know about them?
I think it's about right, maybe a little on the low side. I will say them being picked behind North Carolina is a little crazy to me. I don't think that I can get behind that. But I also think that maybe Syracuse has a little bit more of a case than what they got. I think they were picked 12th in the poll, which feels a little low to me. So I think 7, 8, 9, somewhere in that range is pretty fair. And I will say, I think that Clemson and maybe Miami have a chance to probably be ahead above everybody else in the conference. But once you get from the 3 to 8 range or so, I think everybody's going to be pretty close. I mean, I think that Pitt is a team with a returning quarterback and Eli Holstein that I'm really excited about, an All-American at running back and Desmond Reid, who is kind of everybody's favorite all-purpose player, a defense that obviously is led by Kyle Lewis. There's a lot of pieces to on this team. I think it's going to come down to, for Pitt, one, how do you attack that schedule, right? Because it's a very manageable schedule overall, only 2 ranked games on it, both at the end of the year. So I think that you have to set the tone early, especially when you play a huge game in week 3, like the backyard brawl against Rich Rodriguez. And I think the other thing too is that, can you have a level of consistency that struggled to come about last year, right? They were so dependent on the big play early in the 2024 season. Can they be a little bit more consistent down to down on both the offensive and defensive side of the ball, right? Can they allow fewer big plays, things like that? So I think it's absolutely on the table for them to well overperform where they were picked in the conference, but I also think that there are a lot of fair questions about them as well.
Shehan, you mentioned Clemson and Miami kind of probably being a little bit ahead of everyone else, but does Pitt have a path to the college football playoff? And if so, like, what happens if they don't win the ACC? Do they still have a path, or is it ACC or win the championship or bust?
Well, again, we talk about their schedule. It's pretty manageable. And last year, when you look at SMU, obviously they lose the ACC title game, but because they were an 11-1 team, they have a chance to get there. Now, here's the complication, is that I think that for Pitt to have a chance, they definitely have to beat Notre Dame, like 100% have to beat Notre Dame. And that is a big ask, just because they don't have that many opportunities for marquee wins on their schedule. And then I think that they probably need Miami to be the ACC champion if they lose that game, because if you're 11-1 and you've blown through most of the rest of your schedule and maybe you lose to Miami, I mean, that's a tough position to be in. But I think that the other piece too is if they are 11-1 with that win over Notre Dame, I think you can afford to maybe lose an ACC title game and get in. That's, I think, the pathway. I think that for both Big 12 and ACC teams, especially ones that are not ranked to start the year, you kind of do have to be in a position where you are like 11-1 or 12-0 going into the ACC title game or Big 12 title game and lose that game. I think it's much tougher, for example, if you're 10-2 and lose that game. Now, I think the maybe other pathway is like if there are 3 11-1 teams and you're the third one, I think that maybe puts you in a decent position. But you start getting into tiebreakers and math and all this sort of stuff, and then Lord knows at the end of the day you don't want to be at the mercy of tiebreaker rules.
Want to just say keep the questions coming in the chat. We're going to get to those eventually. But Shehan, I wanted to follow up a little bit on that. So you mentioned that this is kind of the state of the world for both Big 12 and ACC teams. So I guess, how do you view the conference strength overall? And is, for a team like Pitt, is their path to the college football, is it affected by, I guess, put simply, outside conference perception of the conference from the outside?
I think it is. This is a conference that's very top heavy right now, right? I mean, I think that Clemson will be a top 5 team all season long. I think they'll contend for the number 1 seed. Well, Pitt doesn't play them, right? They don't have the opportunity to pick up a win like that. Miami's in that range. I kind of think that Miami might fall off a little bit, but you're fine. But I think that like those are the 2 teams that have some credibility. And by the way, that does give them a little bit of a leg up versus the Big 12, is that they have two top 10 teams. But I think that also makes it really difficult to rise the same way, especially, by the way, when you do play an 8-game conference schedule. I think that for these teams, like, you have to take care of business in the non-conference, especially, by the way, not just for Pitt, but for teams that have Big 10 and SEC games on their schedule. I mentioned, Baylor playing against Auburn in week 1. That is, to me, a huge game for the Big 12 conference as a whole, because if Auburn beats one of the better teams in your league, well, that really hurts perception of the league and also impacts whether you're going to have a chance to have a second team that has the resume to maybe get into the field. So I think that the Big 12 and ACC are kind of in different positions, because the ACC has such obvious contenders that are sort of very high credibility. The Big 12 has a lot of teams that can maybe get there, but I do think that ultimately, when you don't have as many established programs from 3 to 7, let's say, in each conference, that's where I think it gets very difficult.
Shehan, you brought up the non-conference, and I'm jumping around on our list of questions a little bit, but I mean, you're a Big 12 guy. Pitt plays West Virginia in the backyard brawl. What can you tell us about about West Virginia with the new coach and how things are going down there?
Well, first of all, I don't know who at West Virginia agreed to hold that game on 9-13? That's crazy to me. For people who don't know, that was the score of the last game of Rich Rodriguez's career when he lost to Pitt to cost him a chance to play for a national championship. I think most Pitt fans probably know that.
I think our audience is probably
I think your audience probably knows that one. But every podcast is someone's first. So that's crazy in itself. But it's going to be so much fun to get to see Rich Rodriguez back on the sideline. I think that him and and Coach Narduzzi are going to be such a natural rivalry. I think just their personalities. They're both big talkers. They love to talk crap. I think it's going to be tremendous. West Virginia is turning over a lot. They only return, I believe the number is 2 starters from their team last year. It is a completely new group of people. I will say one of the guys that they return is Jaheim White at running back, who might be the best running back in the Big 12. I'd have him second right now, but I think he's going to have a chance by the end of the year in that offense. So he is a dynamic player. He's going to go off against some people. He's going to have a 200-yard, 3-touchdown game. So he is somebody that Pitt will need to prepare for early and often. But I think a lot of this first game is going to be feeling out by West Virginia. They're going to be feeling out, what do we have? They're going to be feeling out, we like the defensive personnel that we have, but is it going to be ready for prime time? But the one thing that I'll say is that, again, I hear a lot from the West Virginia side of things. Rich Rodriguez is going to put a lot into that game. He knows how his last tenure ended, and there's nothing he'd like more than to come back to Morgantown and finally get revenge.
Yeah, because he's really just kind of finally, I don't want to say like you. I say it because you wrote, you wrote about Rich Rodriguez coming home to West Virginia and kind of the phenomenon of kind of former coaches going back to schools where they had a lot of success at. He's really just kind of now mending bridges at West Virginia right after 13-9 and after losing that game in 2007. It's been a process for him to kind of come back from that, if I understand right.
100%. And actually, there's a great piece over in Yahoo Sports just this week by Ross Dellinger where he really got into that. And I mean, it's down to the level of people are like his hometown found the sign that says home of Rich Rodriguez because they had tossed it in a storage unit for so long because nobody wanted to see it anymore. I mean, it was really contentious when he did leave. And there are people who accused him of basically throwing that Pitt game. I promise you, he would never, ever, ever do that, with a chance to play for a national championship. But no, I mean, that's the kind of hate that was there for a long time, because he's a native son. He's from the state of West Virginia. And look, I mean, everybody who roots for a college football team that isn't a blue blood knows this, right? If you don't come from that world, the last thing that you want is to believe that your program is a stepping stone to somewhere better, right? Especially, by the way, if you are literally a native son. So that hurt people for a long time, but he spent a lot of time mending bridges. He's gone on essentially a huge apology tour at this point, kind of being like, hey guys, I obviously should not have left. And I think the other thing too is that, and he talked about this with us at CBS Sports. I mean, yes, obviously there's a piece that's you had success at West Virginia before, but he 100% does not get this job if he doesn't have success at Jacksonville State in Conference USA, right? He has continued to coach, continued to learn, and it'll be fascinating to see moving back to the Power Conference level for the first time since 2016, I believe it is, whether he's still up for the moment.
Yeah, Shehan, speaking of, head coaches, looking at Pat Narduzzi, we're around him just about every day. We have a different perspective, but from an outside perspective and, just knowing college football, knowing Pat Narduzzi, what's your impression of him 10 years in? And do you think he'll be here for another 10 years?
What's funny is that I believe the last game that he coordinated at Michigan State was Baylor-Michigan State in the Cotton Bowl, which I went to Baylor, by the way. So the last game that he coordinated was actually when I was on the sidelines for, which is kind of fun to think back to, which also makes me feel very old. But I do think that Look, he's come in here. I think that he's established a strong culture overall. I think they've done a tremendous job of identifying high-level pieces and players. I mean, you look at some of the guys on defense, especially on the defensive line that they put into the NFL. Obviously, Kyle Lewis is going to be a guy who maybe can join that list soon. I think that, again, I mean, it is not easy to continually find NFL-type players on the defensive and offensive line. And he's done that. It took him a little too long, in my opinion, to update his priors offensively. But like the fact that they've really invested in keeping Kade Bell there, that shows growth to me. That shows that he's serious about this, right? And so I think that the story of Pat Narduzzi is one, a coach who has set a strong culture, built a program in his image, which I think that not every coach is capable of doing. And I think that while at times it's been slow to adjust, I think he always has eventually adjusted and been ready for that moment. So, again, look, I think that the funny thing about Pitt and a person like Pat Narduzzi is like, it's rare to have guys last 10 years in this business anymore, even at the elite places. Like, I mean, you look around, I mean, it just doesn't happen all that often anymore. Especially, I mean, again, like obviously he has that 2021 ACC title to kind of look back on, but like, especially for people who aren't contending year in and year out. But I think that it's been a really nice marriage where he understands his place understands him. And I think that he has managed to endear himself in such a way that, again, like the reality of the situation for everybody in college football right now, when you think about making a coaching change, is one, can we do better? And two, would that money be better spent, maybe spending it on players? And the answer right now is obviously yes.
Well, Shehan, thank you so much for that insight into Pitt, into West Virginia, into the Big 12, into the kind of college football landscape nationally. We cannot thank you enough for taking the time to speak with us. If you have anything you want to plug, any stories or Twitter, please do it now.
Yeah, you can read all my work over at cbssports.com. You can find on all social media platforms at Shehan Jeyarajah. You can listen to my podcast, The College Football Insiders Show, on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And we did release our full list of ACC picks over at cbssports.com, so make sure to check that out.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us, Shehan, and enjoy week one.
Thank you so much for having me.
That was Shehan Jeyarajah, from CBS Sports. Jeyarajah from CBS Sports. We really appreciated him joining our live stream and helping us kick off this channel, giving us a lot of really great insight into not just Pitt, but college football at large. We've asked a lot of people questions. Abby, we're going to get back to asking ourselves some questions, and we're going to field some questions from the audience to kind of round out this show. We appreciate everyone who stuck with us through, we're going on 52 minutes now, but we appreciate everyone who has stuck around and is watching this afternoon, spending some of your Friday evening with us. So let's get into one that I think, you should be able to answer pretty easily. Both of us should be able to answer pretty easily, but it comes from Jim. How nervous are you about the kicking, punting and place kicking? Some returner at punter, but a new face at place kicker that Pitt's got to break in. Abby, what's your read on the special team situation?
So I'm feeling pretty good about punting. I mean, Caleb Junko has really solidified himself in the spot. Didn't have the best year last year, but he's got this air of confidence around him. They were talking about his hang time being longer, his balls going farther in general, and it hopefully is a good step for improvement. So I don't feel as nervous for that. I will say I am a little nervous about place kicker, simply because, it's funny because on Tuesday I got asked a question similar about starters for place kicker, and I brought up James London and Sam Carpenter because I think for just about everyone around Pitt, we really thought that those were the two options. So when Coach Narduzzi told us yesterday that it was going to be Trey Bukowski, I was a little shocked. And, I'm sure he's a phenomenal kicker, but Acrisure is a challenge. And also just being a true freshman in general is a challenge. The coaches obviously saw something in him. They believe in his confidence. I've seen him kick. We got to see him kick a couple times at practice, and he's got a good leg. I'm just nervous about the fact that he's a true freshman. He only came recently, he only came to campus in June. And it's interesting to me. What about you? What do you think?
Yeah, so I'm totally with you. Punting is the last thing that I am worried about with this team. I think Caleb Junko is extremely solid. Is he going to be an All-American? Probably not. But I think he's going to give you between 45 and 50 yards a kick, and he's going to do that much more consistently than he ever has in his career. It was tough to watch at times in 2023. It was a lot better in 2024, and I expect it to be a lot better in 2025. Place kicking, here's the thing that concerns me, and then a reason for optimism, or at least, a reason to not be as nervous. So Trey Bukowski told us that his range, he had hit from 58 in high school, and that he feels comfortable from up to 63 yards, which I think that's, I think every kicker likes to exaggerate their range a little bit. But before that, Pat Narduzzi had told me that his effective range, or had told us, in a scrum, that his effective range was about 50 yards. 58 and 50, that's a pretty big difference. 58 is Ben Saul's range. 58 is Ben Saul saying, like he told us last year, just get over midfield and I can get you points. That's not going to be a weapon that Pitt's able to utilize this year. You shouldn't expect to have a kicker who can hit from that long year in and year out. But my reason to not maybe panic as much about that is that I don't think that Pitt is going to kick as many field goals this year. I think naturally they're going to score a lot of touchdowns, the big plays, year two in Kade Bell's offense for all of those reasons. But I think they're also just going to generally be more aggressive. I think that comfort in this system, the comfort with Eli Holstein, is going to make them more aggressive on fourth downs. It's going to make them want to go for touchdowns more often than field goals. So, there's going to be a learning curve with Trey Bukowski. You kind of hope that the ACC championship or the Notre Dame game or the backyard brawl doesn't come down to, a 50-plus yard field goal from a true freshman. You're hoping that it's in the offense's hands and that they're able to win the game on their terms. With that said, let's keep it moving. We've got another one from Stort here, and he asks, I need to say this, but what makes you think that Desmond Reid at his size can last a full season? And Abby, if you don't mind, I would like to lead this one off.
Go for it. Lead it.
So I believe Desmond Reid played in 10 games last year. He missed the Boston College game and the Youngstown State game. I don't think he was necessarily hurt during the Youngstown State game, but it was more of a precautionary thing. He played banged up throughout the entire year. But I think back to 2022, when Israel Abanikanda was playing at a similar, you probably say better level than Des played at last year. He was an ACC Player of the Year candidate, an All-American candidate. He was just running over people. But even Israel Abanikanda missed at least a game and a half, if not more, that season. If you want to count the bowl game, he was sitting out in anticipation of the NFL draft. Israel Abanikanda was built like a sports car. He was huge. He had these massive biceps. He had a huge chest. He weighed, I think, at least 50 pounds more than Desmond Reid does. And even he, kind of had some wear and tear on him. He had to miss a couple games as well. That's just kind of the nature of being a number one workhorse running back for any football team, college, pro, high school, even. What makes me think Desmond Reid at his size can last a full season? Well, I think they're not going to just run in between the tackles as much as they used to, or as they might have last year. I think they're going to put him out in space in the passing game a lot more. I think Pitt in general is just going to throw the ball a lot more this year. But maybe he doesn't last a full season. Maybe he has to miss a game or two. You can never predict a season-ending injury, but I think Desmond Reid is going to give you everything that you hope for out of him, and you just hope that he's healthy enough for the big games. I can't tell you that I think he's going to last a full season and play all 12, 13 plus games that I think Pitt's going to play this season. But I think he's going to be healthy enough, if that makes sense.
I think the thing that worries me a little bit about it, he's a tough guy. He's going to fight through everything that he can to an extent, knowing that, NFL draft is coming. But at the same time, it was talked about quite a lot at the kickoff luncheon. Stephen and I were honored to attend today, where they named captains, and that, it's empty the tank kind of vibes. And I see Desmond Reid as the kind of guy to just give everything and fight through it. My fear, though, is that there is, some injuries in the running back room, which has really made the depth in that room a lot smaller than Pitt would have wanted. And I worry that they're going to utilize him almost too much, which therefore is going to make him more tired toward the end of the season. Like, don't get me wrong, the guys behind him, I mean, Joel Goff has done really well in camp, but it's just a little nerve-wracking when you have, a guy so important to the team like Desmond Reid. You need him to get through the season. Yeah, he's a smaller guy. I don't think it's going to be him that's holding himself back. I think if anything, it's going to be, we're going to take some time off Des kind of vibes from the coaches.
Absolutely. I do agree. I think, you will see him in the first half against Duquesne. If all goes according to plan, you will not see him in the second half. I don't think you'll see him against Central Michigan, honestly. I think it's been interesting to hear from the coaches through the 2 scrimmages that they played in training camp. Joel Goff took a lot of reps. Jeyarajah Turner, the true freshman, when he was healthy, he took a lot of reps. Justin Cook, transfer from East Stroudsburg, Division II school. He played really well in the spring game. He was taking a lot of reps as well. I get the sense that Pitt, I don't have any, inside information in this way. It's more of a hunch, but I think, and I get the sense that Pitt is preparing for Des to be a little bit limited or maybe be on a pitch count in those first 2 games. You let him loose in the backyard brawl, and then you get a bye week before you go into Louisville. It's the start of the ACC schedule, and that Louisville game is a really huge test, and I think really a place where the season hinges. So I would anticipate Pitt being a little bit more cautious with Des like they have during training camp. He didn't play in either of those scrimmages, so they can make some more time for the younger guys. I think Des is going to be a little bit limited until really, we get into the thick of September and maybe even, I guess not October, not that late. But, yeah, I think he's going to be limited for a little bit as well. Moving on, we got some questions via email, and I want to bring this one up from Connor. I thought it was interesting. Which of the 2 preseason top 10 teams on Pitt's schedule are the Panthers more likely to beat, or do they have a better chance of upsetting? So that's number 6 Notre Dame or number 10 Miami. Both of these teams, they play within the month of November. But Abby, in your mind, who's more likely to go down at the hands of the Pitt Panthers? Is it Notre Dame or Miami?
I'm going to take Miami on this one. And, I originally was like, is both away versus home. Both of them are home. The thing with the Miami game is that is the season finale. Usually a lot of teams put out every last little juice that they have on a game like that. And for Pitt, especially knowing it is one of their top opponents that season, they'll want to make a splash. And barring any injuries, I feel like that is a game you're going to see. I mean, they're going to be 110% effort all the games, but I wouldn't be surprised if you see a little extra energy. I also just think this Notre Dame team is too good that I don't necessarily see a world in which this Pitt squad could really take them down. Obviously, crazy things have happened in college sports and college football. I could be very wrong there, but I like Pitt's chances against Miami. Still a phenomenal team, don't get me wrong. I just feel like when you have a little bit more familiarity around a team and just that, Miami is Miami, and obviously both are in the ACC. But with it being the end of the season, it really makes me think that I feel more confident saying Miami than Notre Dame.
I'm with you. I think for a couple of reasons, similar to along what you outlined. I think Notre Dame is really, really good. And I think especially defensively. I could see a scenario where Pitt maybe plays Notre Dame to a 17-14 game, but loses. It's really hard for me to imagine Pitt kind of overcoming that defense and overcoming, I think, what Notre Dame has in the trenches, which is always really, really strong. That's been true for a while, and it seems like Notre Dame has maybe picked up a couple receivers that they really like. So we'll see what happens there. It is hard for me to imagine them beating Notre Dame. Miami, different question. I'm looking over Miami's schedule right now. So they play Notre Dame week 1. They play Florida in week 4. That's a rivalry game. They get a bye week, and then they play another rivalry game at Florida State. And then they got to play at SMU later in the year. The potential for pitfalls on that schedule for a team like Miami, which has playoff aspirations, has national championship aspirations. It can go south pretty quickly. And I think you have seen Miami teams in the past really waver. They've been really talented. They've had these high expectations and maybe started really well, but then they waver when the season kind of gets towards its end, when maybe they take a loss or two. It's different in a 12-team playoff era, but this is a really kind of, I think, emotionally draining schedule for this Miami team. And you really don't know which team is going to show up to Acrisure Stadium on November 29th. So I'm with you. I think I think Miami is that top 10 team that Pitt is more likely to upset. And they've done it before. They've done it before the weekend of Thanksgiving. Kenny Pickett in 2017 took down a top-ranked Miami team. So I could definitely see that happening again. Abby, do you want to pull another one of these questions that we got from our list?
Yeah, this one comes from Mike. He asks, who is the most important player on this team? Meaning, if he went down with an injury, the team-wide effect would be largest. And I'd like to kick this one off, if that's okay.
Go for it.
I feel like we've talked a lot about him already, but my answer here is Desmond Reid. I mean, with the lack of depth right now in the running back room, it would be just devastating for Reid to go out, especially because he is who he is. He already is the best player, but you don't necessarily have a lot of people behind him that are able to step up and fill those shoes. Like, look, Joel's Goff looks great. Shakarian Turner, they were really hot under in the spring. He's been banged up and has missed camp a bit. But then after that, I get a little nervous because you've got Justin Cook, who came from Division II and joined in January, but they moved him from wide receiver to running back. He's never played running back in college. That's a little nerve-wracking. And the other one is, they brought in, I think he's an eighth-year player. Yes, yep. Jalen Williams. Jalen Williams, an eighth-year player. How that math works out is beyond me. Pat Narduzzi has said that he's out of shape. I'm not saying that he's out of shape. Pat Narduzzi said that. And
yes. The coach I just want to clarify football shape. I think he wasn't anticipating on playing another year of college football, got the call from Pitt, had a connection with Kade Bell. And I think that's where but continue. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good. Thanks for clarifying. Yeah. Out of football shape. And so, I like that he has experience, but if he's out of football shape, really, how much can he add to such a fast-paced offense, even though he knows the offense? I think Desmond Reid is kind of the pin right now. You look at the other positions, quarterback, linebackers. I'm not necessarily worried if Eli Holstein goes out. I'm not necessarily, I would be a little bit worried or a lot of bit worried if Kyle Lewis goes out. However, I feel like there's more depth behind them, simply put, and that is not the case in the running back room.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you spelled out that case for Desmond Reid. It's pretty much the obvious choice in my mind. To play a little bit of devil's advocate, Eli Holstein is the guy that you've been counting on all offseason to really take a step forward. And you look at Pitt historically, they go as their quarterback play does. When they have good quarterback play, they're a good team. When they don't, they're a bad team. It's pretty simple that way, more or less, with some caveats. Eli Holstein is one of them, but, you have Cole Gonzalez, who I think is a really capable backup behind him. I think the other position that maybe has an argument is center, which is maybe off the wall a little bit. I think, if you lose Lyndon Cooper, the kind of ripple effect from having to, maybe move Keith Gueva over into center or bring in a Ryan Coretta into play center or play some guard, I think it just creates a trickle-down effect throughout the rest of the offensive line that would be really devastating. And I'll throw out another one out there. I think you talked about it a little bit when we talked about the linebackers, but they really should hope they don't lose Braylan Lovelace. I think that's given – that you lost Jeremiah Marcelin. I think Braylan Lovelace has played a lot of football. I think he's really well conditioned. He's shown that he's durable, but he's never been a full-time starter before. And so, losing Marcelin, there's not a super obvious backup option behind him. I think they really need Lovelace to be to be an Iron Man and to be a guy who is in there just about every game and just about every snap almost. He should, be playing upwards of, I think, 80% of Pitt snaps last year, kind of along the same lines as Kyle Lewis. So, I'd say center and middle linebacker, those are two positions where they can't really afford to lose anyone.
Like Braylan Lovelace is probably the biggest on the defense, and then Desmond Reid is probably the biggest on the offensive that you don't want to lose, because those two guys are very important to how the whole systems work on each side. Absolutely.
And on that happy note, we are going to wrap this up. We appreciate everyone who tuned in, who asked questions. We appreciated our awesome guests. Those were great conversations. Hope to have them back sometime soon. Make sure you're staying tuned into this channel. We are going to be here, all next week, all throughout football season, into basketball and volleyball season as well. Abby's going to have a dedicated Pitt volleyball podcast, so be on the lookout for that. That's going to be really exciting. Pitt kicks off their season tonight against Nebraska on Fox, a national TV game coming up in about 45 minutes or so. So please stay tuned to our coverage on YouTube, on post-gazette.com. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and we will see you all the next time that we record. We're going to have podcasts. We're going to have short form video. We'll maybe do some more live streams like this. We don't know just yet. But thank you all for tuning in to our kickoff show, and we will see you all next time.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.